is just exciting to hear from our first class of fellows, I guess is what you would say, right?
Yes, this is going to be a great opportunity to just hear about their experiences, the work that they did with their hosts. And for people who are interested in the fellowship to get a feel for what this is. We did extend the deadline from May 1st to June 1st. So if you are interested in applying, we do have some more time for that. And I can go over at the end of the meeting how where you can find information on how to apply. But I can just introduce our first presenter so far. We have Clair Cooper, and she did her fellowship on a virtual basis with the Urban Systems Lab. So Claire, you can take it away whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thanks Tessa, and hello everyone. I'm just gonna share my screen and hopefully this is gonna work. So can you all see my slides? Hopefully you can. Yes. Do. Great.
We can, but it's not in presentation mode.
Right, okay, thank you for, how do I sort that out?
You should see a button that says swap displays. Try that.
Is that it? I've done it or no?
It's showing us a thumbnail.
Now it's smaller.
Is it smaller? Is it? Oh God! Sorry.
If you exit, you can exit and then choose another monitor. There is an option on the top of your PowerPoint to.
I can see why. Right. Okay. Sorry, everybody. I don't know what's going on here. Hang on.
That's okay.
Can you see it yet?
Yes.
You can now.
Yes. Perfect.
Thank you. Sorry. What had happened was.
Don't worry about it.
I took the monitor and forgot to unplug it. How completely stupid. Not very good for the nerves either. So sorry about that, everyone. So I'm Clair Cooper. As Tess said, I'm a NATURA fellow with the Urban Systems Lab, but I'm also a PhD candidate at University of Durham, and I've recently started a job with Marcus Collier as a research fellow on the Novel Eco project at Trinity College in Dublin. And what I want to do today, if I can get my slides to move. Now my slides aren't moving. This is great, isn't it? So it should be going to next slide and it's completely frozen.
Maybe you can try exiting and then
Yeah, okay, I'll stop sharing for a minute and see if it works again. Right, so can you see that? Yeah, let's hope. Mean technology. So what I wanted to do today is to talk about what I accomplished during my fellowship and the work that I did, but then also focusing on the pilot study that I did using some social media data to investigate whether or not Twitter data could be used as a proxy indicator for health. some work that I did on my PhD and the Future Cities podcast, but then also share some learning points some advice that I've got for other people who are potentially thinking about applying for the NATURA Fellowship Programme, and some general advice on that. And what I would say, even before I start my presentation, is I'd encourage you to do so. If you're thinking about doing it, don't think about it, just do it, would be my advice. So in terms of the fellowship itself, what was I going to do? So the work that I wanted to do was examine the interplay between physical activity, effect, and urban green space provided by nature-based solutions, and what was the role of social media data in that analysis. So we all know that there's a complex interplay between urban diversity, the built environment, income equality, which has a significant effect on health inequality in cities. However, in designing nature-based solutions, when the conceptual framework was first developed, public health wasn't really central to it. And consequently, there have been, because it's a relatively new concept, there are relatively few studies that kind of unpack the complex pathways between the management and governance nature-based solutions and health. And one of the challenges around this issue is that within epidemiology, there's often a lack of data because of participants not necessarily responding to surveys. It's very resource intensive and time consuming. Data isn't necessarily available across different geographical scales. But there's been some work done by some scholars, particularly kind of Roberts and Swartz, looking at, can social media be used as a proxy both for physical activity, so exercise and recreation in green spaces, and also the effect that being in that green space or doing some form of exercise in that green space has on mental health in particular sort of effect. And when I talk about effect, what I mean is effect isn't really particularly, there isn't a consistent definition, but it's referring to, how you might be feeling emotionally, your mood. So it's very connected to mental well-being and good mental health. So in terms of the research method that I used, so the API tool was used to extract data for New York. We extracted Twitter data, emojicons, and the meta-analysis associated with that. And then the process of lemnisation and stemming began. And that's basically where, before you do any analysis of the tweets themselves, you've got to remove all of the different characters that form part of that tweet. So there might be hashtags in there, quotes, @signs, and various different symbols that may not necessarily be of use for the sentiment analysis. Once that step was completed, and that was done in a mixture of R and Python. So that was one of the outcomes from the fellowship, is I got to dabble in a little bit of Python, but I'm by no means an expert. I wouldn't come to me for any advice on it. So then the thematic coding was completed of the Twitter data, looking at whether, where physical activity took place. Was it in park? Was it in green space? Was it just in the urban area? And what was the type of physical activity. So they were classified according to whether it was walking the dog, or running, cycling, or just being in green space. But then also extracted the emoticon data associated with each tweet and looked at whether or not that could be classified in terms of, so what was the symbology that was being used in the, so was it a tree, was it a flower? Could that be a representation or indication of being in nature? And then when all of that was, that work was completed, I then used a linguist inquiry tool called WLWIC, which basically takes the Twitter data and examines the words that have been used in the tweets, looking at traces for belief, effect, social relationships, and then I calculated the scores for each tweet and completed some regression analysis across each of the different characterization of tweets. So what did the results tell us? Well, I looked at 4 different boroughs, or the 5 different boroughs across New York, and early indications suggest that the effect score in emotion was related to different types of exercise within green space, but also urban space, even after adjusting for co-founding based on data published in the US Census around those families who are below poverty line, those who might be receiving social security payments and education attainment. But those findings did vary across each of the different boroughs. So there's obviously something else going on there within the data. And I've also looked at the role that ethnicity has in terms of, because ethnicity has been linked to people doing exercise in green space, or whether they do or don't. But the data is somewhat fragmented in terms of the breakdown in ethnicity, so that needs a bit more investigation. So in conclusion, the conclusions that I really reach from this work is that social media data can be used as a proxy for effect and for physical activity or recreation. But it's important to note that the data itself may not necessarily reflect actual green space usage. And effect scores are generally will improve when there's more textual data available, and some tweets can be quite short. And some demographic groups don't necessarily use social media data. But what I'm going to do with this next is to kind of look at how these relationships differ at a much smaller granularity of scale. So the plan is to do some spatial analysis based on the proximity to parks and the effect score and physical activity, but also incorporate other forms of social media data. So we're currently trying to get hold of some Strava exercise data for New York, and then once that's completed, hopefully publish the findings later on this year, or attempt to anyway. In terms, so just moving on very quickly, so what else did I do during the fellowship? Well, I finished off writing up my PhD. Unfortunately, one of my family members was very, very poorly, and timescales slipped, and unfortunately the PhD overlapped with the fellowship. But the good thing was I was able to submit my thesis, and I've also submitted one of my empirical chapters looking at the relationship between health and nature-based solutions at a city scale to cities and health. And in addition to that, I also recorded a couple of podcasts for the Future Cities podcast series in the run-up to COP to help 2 projects in Glasgow promote what they were doing to different people around the world. But in terms of what have I learned, and this is a huge learning point for me, and many people will have seen this slide possibly already, but you know, trying to juggle family life and doing a PhD and everything else that crops up in the world can be a bit tricky, and I've certainly found that during my PhD. So what I would say is, it's thinking about applying for your for a fellowship. You know, I would talk to people about your ideas early, and I would really encourage you to do so, because it might be that they might need a little bit further development, or they might need scaling back, or you know, they might have other ideas that kind of build on yours to help build a stronger proposal. But don't be too ambitious. I was too ambitious, especially with you know, how much I wanted to achieve. And in my case in particular, when things started to go a little bit kind of pear-shaped because I was just juggling too much, it's really important to kind of go back to people and be open and honest. I mean, I had amazing support. You know, I don't have a bad word to say about this network and all of the people in it, but it's really important to be open, transparent, and just be honest. You know, if things are not working out, tell people, share. I found that people were really, really helpful, particularly Tim and Chris and Tessa as well. And don't be afraid to reach out to other fellows to ask them for their advice in making an application. You know, some people like me, I've even shared mine with a couple of people, you know, just to give you an idea of how to structure it, what sort of thing to write in the letters, you know. Yeah, so that's my presentation. I hope it was useful and interesting. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Claire. That was great. We can do about a minute or two of questions if anyone has them. Please just unmute yourself and speak up if you do.
Thanks for your presentation, Claire. I'm interested in this Twitter analysis because I've also did something, working on like revising a paper based on Twitter analysis. I wanted to know a little bit more about like the details, how you did that. Did you extract particular keywords in relation to particular activities? Also, how did you extract geolocation? Because I wasn't able to get like a particular location of where people are in the city. And also maybe you could talk a little bit more about the results, because the charts were so big, it was hard to understand what's going on. Could you just talk a little bit of what are the main like findings from there?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was trying to pack too much information in, as always. Key learning point, another one anyway. So in terms of the extraction, the extraction of the data, for Twitter, you're reliant on who gives you access to the spatial data, which was then uploaded into GIS. And I was able to get the coordinates from that to then extract those for spatial analysis. So you should be able to get some spatial data. Not all of it may be available, but you should be able to get some if you're using the Twitter API. In terms of the process of lemnisation, you've basically got to define all of your stop words, so things, you know, words that you would be removing from the analysis, you know, like particular words that may not necessarily have any specific meaning to the tweet. and then removing all the additional characters, and don't underestimate just how much time that takes. I mean, I use the Quilida package in R, which has got some really good data dictionaries. But at one point I did need to look at that data within Python because I had a particular problem with stemming the data and putting it all back together before doing some analysis. And in terms of the overall findings, I found that there's something going on within the data that suggests that in more social economically deprived wards, the effect scores are related to physical activity, but they differ in terms of whether or not they relate to the urban environment or whether or not it's specifically related to green space. So there's something else going on there, and I don't know what that something else is at this point in time, which is why it needs other forms of social media data, not just Twitter. I think, you know, you need to be, Twitter has its limitations in terms of the age demographic that will typically use Twitter. So you've got to try and build up, layer different data sets based on, you know, who might use Instagram, who might use Flickr. What are the different types of data sources that you can pull together to look at, you know, the relationship between health and say how a green space or a nature-based solution is managed and governed, to try and unpack those pathways. I don't know if that answers your question. Do you have, but feel free to kind of prod me a bit further if it doesn't, Juliana.
Just one also follow up. Like, did you extract a random sample, or did you extract based on particular keywords?
It was based on particular keywords. So essentially, I looked at what data was contained either within a green space or within a certain distance of a green space, because otherwise I would have just have had too many tweets for me to handle anyway. Because the idea of this was a pilot study. If it proves fruitful, then the thing to do would then to do this type of analysis across a number of different cities and compare the results.
And I know I saw another raised hand, but we will need to move on to the next presentation to stay on time. But please, if you have any other questions for Claire, put them in the chat and we can continue the discussion there. So next up, we have Laura Costadone, who did her fellowship with ReNature. So Laura, oh, looks like you might be sharing your screen now. Perfect.
Yeah, okay. Can you guys see everything?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so I'm kind of excited to finally be able to present the work I've been doing for the NATURA fellowship. And I just want to say it was a great opportunity. So of course, I encourage everybody to apply. For me, it was also like something that brought me a very good luck. I been awarded this fellowship just at the end of my PhD, and it was like before I found like a great job here in Finland. And I think, I don't know, I really feel that this was like an extra thing I added to my PhD curriculum. So I really encourage everybody to be brave enough and apply. And plus, it gives you the chance of being part of this great network that is NATURA. So for this fellowship, we look at insight into nature-based recreation in a small island that we all know, Malta, from crowdsourced data. And I have to warn you, maybe throughout the presentation, you may feel either nostalgic or you may really feel the urge of going and visit this place, because it's truly like a special place. So we look at nature-based recreation because those are important ecosystem service derived from landscape. And when we talk about nature-based recreation, we include a variety of activities ranging from relaxing or walking into a urban park or cycling or swimming. And the benefit that these activity provide are like wide and well-known, like physical, psychological well-being, but they're also very important in terms of economic benefit for communities and business. But of course, there is a side effect to these. Nature-based activities or ecotourism may also increase human pressure and impact on biodiversity. And so it is important to know these to mitigate the trade-off from this sort of recreational activities. And so for these, understanding like people preferences for visiting natural areas can really enable the localization of the most highly valued landscape or ecosystem that can be also at risk. And in these, as we just saw with the Clair presentation, social media can really provide a cost-effective way of gathering a lot of data that are high spatiotemporal resolution. So it can be like a good approach, and is a widely used approach, I must also say, despite the limitation. So the study site is Malta, the Maltese archipelago that include 3 main islands and several small little islands. The largest island is Malta, which is around 27 kilometers long and almost 15 kilometers wide. So it's quite small island that has more than 200 kilometers of coastline. So quite a lot. But if we think about Malta, it's not just like a beautiful coastal scenery. Actually, the landscape is quite heterogeneous. Around 51% of the land use is for agricultural use, and 30% of the surface is covered by urban and industrial areas. And so this is a very like a unique landscape full of like natural areas that provide opportunities for nature-based tourism to both local people and international tourists. And I would also want to say that this small island has the highest population density of the European Union. So the main objective of the study were, first of all, to really assess nature-based recreation preferences of local and tourists, and to look at the potential difference between the dry and wet season. We define dry season from April to September and wet between October and March. And then to identify potential environmental drivers of this nature-based recreation. So in terms of materials and method, we look at the geolocated observation from 2 popular social media platforms, Flickr and iNaturalist. So Flickr is a very popular social media where people share pictures, and iNaturalist is probably the most popular and famous citizen science app. So I retrieved all the geolocated observation that were taken between 2015 and 2021. And then I used the Google Vision pre-trained machine learning algorithm to perform a content analysis of the images. And I ran all my analysis using R. So the Google Vision provided a list of keywords, as you can tell, like a lot of keywords, more than 200,000 keywords that were retained for further analysis. Each keyword was then manually categorized as a biotic or abiotic nature, and also the keyword that defines some nature-based recreational activities like diving, hiking, or swimming were used to categorize images that were depicting nature-based recreational activities. And we also perform a manual content analysis of a random sample of about 10% of the images. And then finally, we use a multiple regression model to identify potential relationship between the nature-based recreational pattern identified from this social media and some of the environmental indicator we selected. So, starting from the result of the keyword analysis, we retrieve more than 40,000 Flickr photos taken by 770 unique photographers. More than 40% of these images represented some sort of nature-based interaction, either abiotic or biotic nature or nature-based recreation. From iNaturalist, we were able to retrieve more than 3,500 unique observations taken between 2015 and 2021. And I must also say that this app is really becoming more popular, because I really saw like an increase in the number of users starting from 2019. So there is a lot of potential in the use of this app for data analysis. From Twitter, we were able to find user information for almost 50% of the user. And so we were able to identify the home location of this user, and the majority were international tourists. And then I just wanted to add one thing. We performed the manual content analysis to assess the level of agreement between the manual and the automated classification performed by Google. And these images here, I think they are self-explanatory, because this is kind of like one of the downside of the machine learning. Like, for instance, the main one, the bird here was classified as a bird, but then if you think about it, it's not really a bird, or the elephant, it was just a pillow. But I mean, overall, the agreement was substantial, but this is something to keep in mind when analyzing something with the machine learning, that the algorithms somehow fail. In terms of the result, these are the labels that were assigned to the Flickr photograph by the Google Vision algorithm. And we can see how like plant, trees, or even grass, they really like come out a lot. It was kind of interesting lake, because somehow a lot of the picture depicting like the sea were perceived perhaps as a lake, but that was actually like a coastal scenery. And here are the results of the kernel density map representing the hotspot of the photo user a day, or the unique iNaturalist observation. And I also wanted to add that since we were interested in assessing which places the most individual used to engage in nature-based recreation, and kind of really to avoid the bias of having a small number of very active users posting like a ton of picture, each data set was filtered to include only one observation per person. And I added some images so you can have an idea, like, okay, you see this red cluster of dot, what's going on there. You can see there is the main cluster represent the area around Valletta, the capital of the island, that also offer a lot of like parks and opportunity to enjoy nature-based recreation. And of course, a lot of like beautiful coastal areas. These are the results from the cluster analysis, and we can see local observation and tourist observation. We found some differences. The local people perhaps seems to be more attracted to recreate around the urbanized area compared to the local. And then I think we got like kind of similar result between the dry season and the wet season. Then we look at the environmental explanatory variables. And for this kind of analysis, we selected the sum of different land use, land cover type, the urban, rural, coastal area, the number of different habitat, different protected site, the NDVI for both wet and dry period, the population density, and also we use as a proxy for accessibility, the bus and the road network. And so when we ran the analysis, we really found that the coastal areas, the protected site and accessibility were a significant driver of nature-based recreation. For, you know, both like the total average of the social media, but also for like tourists, local, dry period and wet period. But also areas of inland and coastal wetland that are very important because these ecosystems support freshwater and marshal communities were also found a significant driver of this type of recreation. So in conclusion, this study kind of shed some light on people preferences for nature-based recreation and activities. And so we found some sign of association between some of the environmental driver and the nature-based recreation activities, which kind of highlighted the importance of green areas within the urban boundaries, but also the importance, of course, of preserving these coastal areas and protected site. We found also some potential differences between local and tourist. And of course, the ultimate goal and importance of this kind of study is really to inform land use planning and conservation management decision by really highlighting which are the potential areas that are at risk because of the high number of people visiting. And with this, I would really like to extend like a special thank you to Mario and to the Natura Network for this opportunity. I didn't mention, but unfortunately, I was not able to participate like in person. I did my fellowship remotely. But that was great because we were able really to make things work and through meetings and endless email. So it was great. Although I was not in Malta because of the COVID. So.
Thank you, Laura. That was great. We can have another minute for questions. Other than that, please speak up if you have any.
There's a question in the chat. You want to answer that one?
So the question is about the birds. I saw many places where birds were caught in too tight cages. I'm not really sure about the birds in Malta. Maybe Mario can answer this. I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I think I can answer. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the problems. Hunting is allowed and trapping is allowed too, and I think there is also some legal issues there which are being tackled between Malta as a member state of the European Union with the European Commission. So there is some pending cases in the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, about that because the government of Malta allows trapping. It applies a derogation of the Birds Directive, and apparently now the European Commission is not in agreement with this sort of interpretation of the derogation, and there's a case I think in front of the ECJ at the moment. I think what Laura did is totally different from this, and I think that also this hunting and trapping is also part of the sort of traditions and the culture of the place. So it's a complex topic, which although I mean I don't do it, I don't agree with it, but I understand that many people actually live for that. It's ingrained in the culture, and it goes a bit beyond what Laura's doing, but that's also maybe one way people enjoy nature. I mean, I don't like it, but unfortunately, it is a tradition. But yeah, I think that Laura did a great job, and I look forward now to working with Laura for this and a publication. And many thanks for NATURA, for Nancy, Timon, and Tessa, and the rest of the network for the support for this fellowship.
Great, Claire, you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm interested in how using Google Vision and also sentiment analysis from Twitter data could be combined. Do you think there's I've not come across in the literature, but then again, I've not specifically looked if there has been any work done on analyzing photographs from a emotional perspective?
Yeah, I think it can be done. There are, I mean, you can think about the Google Vision has a lot of potential, mainly because it's very easy to use, even by someone like me that I'm not really like super sharp in building like complicated, line of code in Python. There is something that I recognize, like the facial. I'm not sure the facial is maybe like a very elementary feeling. It's something, I mean, it could be really worth it to investigate, and perhaps there is a way to even improve the code in an easy way. What I can say, it works really well with the images and is relatively easy to use.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking kind of physical activity, recreation in green space, nature-based solutions, and in turn, how that affects your well-being could be quite an interest, and how those pathways interconnect could be quite an interesting angle to pursue. We should talk about it.
Yeah, we should talk about more because we have a lot of interconnect
overlaps, I think. Yeah. Thanks, Laura. Anyway, it was a great presentation.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Thank you for chiming in, Mario, with the questions. I think we should move on to our next presentation, which is Melissa Ingaruca Moreno, who did her fellowship in person with the Urban Systems Lab at the New School in New York City.
Thank you, Tessa. Hello, everyone. I should say before I start that I have still a bit of a sore throat. So just if I'm interrupted suddenly by a cough, if I reach for my tea, just so you're aware of this, but I'll make my best. I'm going to share my presentation. 1 sec. And can you all see it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so yes, I as Tessa said, I had the chance to actually be physically there at the new school. And I did this fellowship for 15 weeks, although I'm still engaged with some of the work. So in a way, I feel like the fellowship starts kind of a journey for you. So I mean, this is also kind of something to consider for the ones that are interested in doing a fellowship, that it might lead into many other things. But then what I want to share now is the work, the results of the work that I did, and maybe at the end some comments of what happened after I finished, how it's becoming into something else. And I think I mentioned already this. I was supervised by Timon. Yes, it was really nice for me to be able to share all of these ideas that I started to work on when I was at the SRC, the Stockholm Resilience Center. So what I did is I took the research from my master and I made it into the research proposal for NATURA. And so I already had started to do some of this work and I was expanding a bit. So that's the situation basically. Why is not moving? Okay. So here it is. So the topic that I was exploring is this concept of transformative potential, but from this social ecological technological framework, right? So with this, I wanted to assess what was this transformative potential of a number of urban design innovations that are engaging with also a number of technologies. Basically, you could cluster these technologies into groups. The ones that are cognitive technologies, extended reality, sensors, AI, and biotechnologies, which biofabrication, synthetic biology. So to do this, I had two processes. One was to do the theoretical development, and the other to apply that framework to actually study these cases. Okay, so I'll go for the first one, which was the theoretical framework. Let me just move my Zoom that I cannot see my screen. Okay, so basically here the question was how to have a framework where we can assess what are the, let's say, the ingredients that an innovation has that it makes this innovation, let me put it in a different word. Okay, yeah, sorry, just a bit of, so what I was doing, I was looking at transformation theory, and there are many already branches that study transformation processes from social ecological and social technological. So I was trying to see what they have in common that that can be combined to understand transformations that take into account also technology as part of those processes and dynamics. And when I combine all of this with a literature review, so that was my methodology, a literature review. What I put together was a synthesis of all of those streams of literature already. So this is the proposal for assessing the transformative potential of an innovation. So basically what I'm doing is saying that what's driving the behavior of systems, of social, ecological, technological systems, is this dimension of worldviews that also are called paradigms or mindsets or many other different words. And so you have these elements which are then categorized in a set of different paradigms. So here you have ontological paradigms that basically are about the ideas that we hold about the nature of the self and our relationships with the world. Epistemological paradigms that are about the nature of knowledge, the ways of knowing and modes of producing this knowledge, and praxeological paradigms that is vary depending on the system that we're studying. So if we say in urban design, this would be paradigms about what materials are and what is the process of fabrication or manufacturing. And so basically you have in the landscape, you have all of these worldviews that then they shape also what's happening in the system level, the regime level. And in this case, the regime level that I was assessing is the urban design system. And so basically what we have defined as a regime is the status quo, or to put it in a different way, is the system that has been created and it keeps being recreated by a set of dominant worldviews. And this is the color purple, right? And what we have at the other side is the alternative regimes that could emerge if you combined alternative or radical paradigms from alternative worldviews. This will maybe all be more clear with the actual example, but for now, just hang on with me. And then at the niche level, what we have is the innovations. So something that's interesting is that most times innovations are taken for granted that they are radical already, just because they have the word innovation on them. But what I wanted to show is that an innovation can actually carry both radical and dominant paradigms. So it's not black and white. It's not radical or not radical. One innovation can be radical maybe in the way that they are interpreting the human nature relationship, but it can still carry value hierarchical thinking for how we relate to other human beings. So it's more like a spectrum of radicalness, to say so. So I think the picture also describes that it can be combining different elements of dominant and of alternative worldviews. And so that's one aspect of this framework. The other is that we need categories to be able to describe this. So these are the categories. And again, I won't go into that in every of them, but then I will have an example where maybe I show you how one works. But as I said, in ontological type, we have the nature of the self, of human otherness, of nature otherness, technological otherness, time, and so on with epistemological and praxeological. Yes, so just as a summary of the framework, then I would claim that an innovation has transformative potential if it's introducing paradigm shifts, or carrying radical paradigms. But I also highlight that an innovation can carry both. So it can be deviating to different degrees of the dominant worldview of the regime, right? The other thing is that with this framework, we can have a set of categories of paradigms to actually be able to assess about what are those paradigms that we're talking about. Then the other aspect is the cross-scale nature, so that we recognize that they're existing, let's say in the landscape, you can talk about multi-species sustainability, but at the regime, you can talk about multi-species urbanism. And at the niche level, you can see an innovation taking that narrative and actually operationalizing that in a local example. So worldviews are not something that are up or down, or they actually exist across the scales. And this is also the resolution that we need to be able to map how they're influencing specific innovations that we want to assess. And then the fourth thing is that the paradigms exist in system dynamics. So that means that they are embedded in feedback loops. That means that there are variables of the system affecting the paradigm, and also the paradigms, of course, are affecting the behavior of the system. So there is just one phrase from ontological design that might help to understand this, which is, for example, we create a city, but the city itself by the city also create us. So it's kind of what we create also is shaping our cognition and shaping our beliefs. And this is like also the loops that we need to understand when we talk about worldviews. Okay, so I go ahead already with how I was using this framework. So I had 3 scales of analysis, the landscape, so all of these worldviews that exist. And just with the picture here, you can see like kind of blobs. So basically here we have a number of existing dominant worldviews that are called modernistic, humanism, mechanical worldview, etc. So those are said to be dominant worldviews, and you have alternative relational worldviews, ecological worldview, multi-species sustainability, post-humanism, and so many others. So it's a universe of worldviews, and then the job was to try to map what are those paradigms, and can we recognize those for ontological and epistemological and so on. So how are those shaping also at that level of the landscape the understanding of this set of technologies? Because then what my interest was to see how the same technology can be interpreted or framed by dominant or alternative. So a picture which is kind of a summary of this, what I found is that these so-called dominant worldviews like mechanical or modernistic thinking that has influenced modernistic architecture or modernistic urban design, this worldview is also evolving by means of technologies. So it's not something that is static, but it's also being transformed. And this new name, to put it that way, it's something that it's called by many authors transhumanism. So transhumanism is it's the worldview that doesn't challenge any of the dichotomies that are present in the mechanical worldview. Instead, it's actually expanding and creating more dichotomies. And I think this picture of the Cybermen is kind of just an image that represents that. Everything that has been assumed by this human exceptionalism and the view of us being superior to nature, everything is kept in this worldview. And at the same time, we have alternative worldviews such as ecocentric worldview or multi-species sustainability, but that they also have, they share with post-humanism this notion that everything is connected, of relationality, embeddedness. And so I was trying to map worldviews that have also something to say about technology. That's why you see in both cases I was trying to see where is this mechanical worldview going in terms of including technology in that reflection. So that's why transhumanism is here, and the same with alternative worldviews. And also the images already talk by themselves about what is this vision of relationality. That's like in general the discourses that I found at the landscape. And then I was using each of these categories of paradigms that I mentioned to you to do this mapping. Okay, so which paradigms, what do we have for each paradigms? But it's a big map. And then also what I wanted to have is a way to visualize it. So this is what's coming next. Sorry, maybe just what this is good for is to see that one characteristic of these worldviews, these dualisms, binaries, and dichotomies, they shape all the other paradigms. So if you already have a dualism, a dualistic thinking, for the self, that means that you consider this mind-body dualism. For the relation with nature, you have this human nature dualism, and so on. So it's just this characteristic is already shaping a lot of these other categories. Okay, so what we have here is that these categories, and I just use the ones from the ontological categories, they are already interconnected. And when we want to describe it, we're basically not isolating one coupling of, I don't know, social technological or ecological technological. But what we have is that each of these categories are shaping each other when you're actually seeing the description. So I took the example of nature just to show you how this is working in terms of describing this mapping. So the question, I mean, the analysis here is, okay, what does it happen when this dualistic thinking and hierarchical thinking is shaping our relationship with nature? How these other categories are also connected to that. So when you have this dualistic thinking and hierarchical thinking applied to our relationship with nature, you also have, in terms of the self, this self-nature division, which also leads to narrow thinking of health, so human health separated from nature. When you think about this in relation to society, you have this nature, society, dualism, culture, nature, this speciesism, and just the exploitation and domination of nature, society dominating nature in this same hierarchical thinking. When you have it with technology, you have this nature technology dualism. And basically, this is why we have technology that functions against nature. The materiality of technology is not embedded in the circularity of nature. It's a linear process, and many value chains are the proof of that, of linear value chains. And technology is being developed to dominate nature. When you see the linkage with time, with the category of time, you see that the understanding that we have within this mechanical worldview thinking is that we optimize the behavior of nature, that we can control nature, and so on. And you have the same reflection when you look at alternative worldviews. This is already coming from that synthesis. So when you have this relational view of nature, this non-hierarchical multi-species thinking, many names, what do you have then? And so, for example, you see that the notion of self is extended self, is relational well-being, is a notion that our same identity is already an interspecies dynamic with bacteria, with many other organisms that are part of our own identity, to say so. And you have that society is embedded in nature, that there are relations of restoration, regeneration, thinking about multi-species, flourishing and welfare, and so on. So this is just an example to see how this analysis goes. The same happens for ontological, for epistemological, which is what about knowledge? What about all these paradigms of what's knowledge? How do we know? Do we know in a rational way, or do we know in a more sensorial way? So all of these things are, again, mapping what's dominant and mapping what's alternative. So it is a big thread to pull in a way. But what I wanted to see, to put it in context of this, is how all of this is influencing urban design. Because in urban design, what we see now is many niches of these courses coming, like multi-species urbanism, biophilic design, biomimicry, smart city, and many of these discourses are in some degree radical. So because they are focusing in changing one paradigm of the regime, but they also might be carrying aspects that are still part of the old paradigm. So again, the blabs, just to make the reference, okay, I was mapping all of these discourses. Again, it was a literature review, content analysis, and the same big pattern I'll show you just quite quickly. So we have the idea that we have this pattern that is mentioned, that the cities, the way they are today, they have been shaped by this modernist worldview. And so we have modernist architecture, modernist urban design. And when we now see the idea of a smart city, maybe it's not so obvious, but just if you see where the trend is going, it becomes just a smarter, modernist, anthropocentric city. So nothing really changes in all these dualisms and fragmentations that we have, but it's actually being augmented by technology. And this image is kind of this idea, okay, this is a smart city where just it's meant for more consumption and more capitalist, and we still have the same anthropocentric patterns in that. It's just with another cute layer of technology, but it doesn't really change the regime. And then again, as a general reference to the alternative discourses that we have, we have many like biophilia or biomimicry that focus in some aspect of changing our relation with nature. How do we design for other species? How do we design with other species, co-producing knowledge, co-fabricating with other species? How do we design to reconnect us sensorially and cognitively with nature? Biophilic design kind of does that in a way. And how we do all of this, considering that nature is also something hybrid, where technology is embedded in those forces of restoration. So this is the kind of the soup of all of these relational discourses in urban design. Again, the tables, in this case, I didn't do the graph, but the same logic applies. I had tables and I had to see what are these paradigms. And then what I had was a big menu of paradigms, dominant and radical. So what was that useful for? It was useful because then when I would see at one case, at one innovation that I wanted to, sorry, I'm just gonna check my time because I put my timer and I wanna see. Okay. When I wanted to study one case, then I could see, okay, what is the DNA of that case? Which ontological, epistemological, and praxeological paradigms are actually radical or are still part of the dominant worldview? So that was the why, to which degree? So then what we have is that we don't say this is radical or not, but it becomes more of a spectrum. This is radical in this way because it's challenging this paradigm. Of course, the cases that I chose were using some of these technologies. That was the point of doing this whole thing. One case here is from the MIT Responsive Environment Labs, where what they had is they did pervasive sensing in a wetland. So it was a restoration process. They had pervasive sensing, so lots of sensors, acoustic sensors, many types. And what I wanted to do is to connect the data that was coming from that to a perceptual transformation of the human, to say so. So not so that humans could read about it or see it on the paper, but that actually could feel the data to bridge that gap. And in that sense, they were using augmented reality devices, like kind of like, I don't know how to call it, like a gadget that goes in your ear and the sound goes through bone conduction. So it's not blocking your ear, but it's augmenting your hearing. And you could hear underneath the lake, or you could hear birds that are far away. And this was especially useful for bird watchers, for example. So it was augmenting our capacity to perceive ecological change. There were many applications in this case. I'm just mentioning one that's here or there. That was the acoustic thing, but they had many other things going on. Oh, actually, I had a picture here. Yeah, so this was like the device. Yes, and in that sense, there were many experiences of people just narrating how this was changing their knowledge of what's going on in the landscape in a qualitatively different way than what it would have been just if they read about it. Another one here was that they used, so they installed some, like, I don't remember this device, but basically you could hear the sounds of the wetland through the tree that was in the university. So the tree acted as a speaker of the sounds of nature in this wetland. So again, one of these examples of how the idea of designing for restoration is coupled with this idea of a different way of knowing, a more sensorial way of knowing, which is also another paradigm shift. Another example is this, which is when an AI was used to design gardens from the point of view of bees. So again, the idea, how do you use the technology to design for other species? And this is the pattern, like it's just like one art image. There are many things more, but just to mention quickly some of these things. Another one is when they were using, they were 3D printing soil, which is a nice way to use many of these trends of additive manufacturing. But in this case, they were 3D printing soil to inoculate mushroom. And so they were fabricating this landscape that was a mix of the soil and the mycelium to remediate the soil that it was polluted. And so they had all of these steps to make it, as you see in the picture, to restore that park, but combining the thinking that fabrication technologies could go in the direction of designing with nature. There are other cases, but I just wanted to end with the other application of this framework. So one is to assess the cases that we already have, so that we can be critical in which ways they are challenging the dominant paradigm. But the other way is that you have all this menu of radical paradigms. What do you do with them? You can also create scenarios. So creating future scenarios or creating new innovations by tinkering and with radical paradigms. So basically tinkering is like combining different paradigms and see what can happen, is another application of this framework. Just as an example, and this is not really, it's just something that I mixed up a bit to show you. So if you have the idea of designing multi-species cities, so cities that are for more than human species, then a way to combine it with some sensorial paradigm shift is to think, oh, can we have digital twins? Just as like in the smart city narrative, you have digital twins of cities. Can we have digital twins of other species sensorial worlds? So what would that mean is that then you make people able to access different situated perceptual sensorial experiences of other species. And I just put one example here, what it would be like if we could see the CO2 just as some species do, like the mosquitoes, and if we were able actually to see these carbon cycles. So in this way, I'm just trying to say that you can connect a paradigm of design with also paradigm shifts in the ways of knowing, and technologies can be embedded in that loop in a way. So for me, just to end with this is what I would like to see more, that we can tinker and combine different radical paradigms and see how technologies can work embedded in those. Yeah, so that's basically what I did. And part of this reflection is still continuing in one of the NATURA working groups that hopefully we'll manage to go through with that. We are making a proposal for a worldview thematic group. So yeah, this is something that also came up from that for me. And yeah, I'm super excited to continue. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Melissa. We are past time, so we don't have time for questions, but I will post Melissa, Laura, and Claire's information in Slack. So if you aren't connected to our NATURA Slack workspace, please reach out to me. I can put my email in the chat real quick. Please reach out to me and let me know, and I can get you added so you can access that information. And other than that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you to our presenters, Melissa, Laura, and Claire. These were great.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody.
Yeah, great to see you. Thanks, guys. Those were great.
Thank you. Great to see everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.